August 3, 1992. At the Hollywood Bowl, Whitney Houston did something she'd never done before. She walked off stage after just 3 songs. The 17,500 fans didn't know about the phone call she'd received moments before stepping into the spotlight. Write in the comments, where are you listening to this story from? And what time is it right now? The Hollywood Bowl was electric that night. A warm Los Angeles breeze carried the scent of jasmine across the packed amphitheater. Whitney Houston was at the absolute peak of her powers. I Will Always Love You would release in 3 months and change music history forever. The crowd had paid up to $250 per ticket, astronomical for 1992. They expected perfection. They had no idea they were about to witness the most mysterious walk-off in entertainment history. At 8:31 p.m., Whitney emerged in a silver gown that caught every beam of light like liquid mercury. The orchestra swelled with the opening notes of I Wanna Dance with Somebody. The crowd erupted, but those in the front rows noticed something immediately wrong. Whitney's hands were trembling, not from nerves. Whitney Houston didn't get nervous. This was something else. She powered through the first song, her voice flawless, movements precise. But between songs, she kept looking to stage left, where her manager, Roberta Stillman, stood in the shadows. Roberta was holding something, a cellular phone, massive by today's standards, pressed against her chest. The second song was How Will I Know? Whitney's choreography was perfect, but her eyes kept drifting to that same spot. At one point, she actually missed a cue, something that had never happened in her professional career. The band covered seamlessly, but the front row noticed something was terribly wrong. But wait until you hear what happened during the third song. Where Do Broken Hearts Go began with its haunting saxophone solo. Whitney stood center stage, microphone in hand, bathed in golden spotlight. She opened her mouth to sing the first line, and her voice was pristine. I know it's been some time, but there's something on my mind. Then mid-verse, she stopped. Not a pause, not a forgotten lyric. She just stopped singing. The backing track continued. The band kept playing, but Whitney Houston stood frozen, staring at something no one else could see. For 7 seconds, eternity in performance time, silence where her voice should have been. Then she lowered the microphone, turned, and walked off stage. No explanation, no apology, no wave goodbye. She just walked into the wings and disappeared. The most shocking revelation was about to surface. The band vamped for 30 seconds, assuming technical difficulties. The audience murmured, confused but patient. This was Whitney Houston. Surely she'd return momentarily. But then Roberta Stillman, a woman who'd managed talent for 23 years and never once addressed an audience, walked onto the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, her voice shook through Whitney's abandoned microphone. Due to an emergency, tonight's performance must be canceled. Full refunds will be provided. Please exit safely. Thank you for understanding. 17,500 people sat in stunned silence. Then the shouting began. Demands for explanations. Some through programs. Others simply sat in shock. Whitney Houston had never canceled a show mid-performance. Not once. Not ever. Security guard Michael Torres was stationed at the artist entrance that night. According to his witness account, filed in a report nobody has seen until now, Whitney ran past him at 8:43 p.m. No entourage, no bodyguards. She was barefoot, having kicked off her heels, silver gown hiked up, as she ran to a waiting black Lincoln Town car. She was crying so hard she could barely breathe. But the reason why changes everything you thought you knew. To understand what happened, we need to go back 2 hours, 6:30 p.m. Whitney was in her dressing room, warming up her voice with scales. Her vocal coach, Susan Manning, was playing piano. Everything was normal, perfect, even, Whitney was laughing at something her makeup artist, Diane Castle, had said about a disastrous date she'd had the night before. Then the phone rang. Not the dressing room phone. Roberta's cellular. She answered with her usual professional tone. Roberta Stillman. Her face went white within seconds. She walked to the corner of the room, turning her back to everyone, voice dropping to whispers. But Susan Manning heard fragments. How long ago? Where is she now? Police involved? When Roberta hung up, she asked everyone, except Whitney, to leave the room. Diane would later testify she'd never seen Roberta look like that, as if someone had died. Stop. The next part will haunt you forever. Behind closed doors, Roberta delivered news that would shatter Whitney's world. At 6:15 p.m., Whitney's cousin, Felicia Crawford, had been found unconscious in her Newark apartment by her 7-year-old daughter, Amber. Felicia was 16 when she taught Whitney to sing gospel in church. She was Whitney's musical foundation, her spiritual anchor, the one person who knew her before the fame, before the pressure, before she became the voice. But that wasn't the worst part. The mother, traumatized and crying, had called the only number she knew by heart, Whitney's private line. But Whitney was in sound check. The call went to Roberta's emergency phone instead. For 15 minutes, a 7-year-old girl sat next to her unconscious mother, waiting for her famous aunt to answer, not understanding why she wouldn't pick up. Whitney wanted to leave immediately, cancel the show, fly to Newark. But Roberta, thinking like a manager, not a human being, convinced her to perform. 17,000 people, Whitney. Contractual obligations. Lawsuits. Just do 3 songs, then we'll say you're sick. 3 songs. The most devastating detail is still coming. Whitney agreed, but on one condition: Roberta would stay on the phone with the hospital, getting updates. If Felicia's condition worsened, Whitney would know immediately. She'd do 3 songs for the lawyers, then leave for the airport. At 8:28 p.m., 3 minutes before showtime, Roberta's phone rang again. Newark General Hospital. Felicia had been stabilized, but was in a coma. The doctors couldn't explain what happened. No drugs in her system, no head trauma, no obvious cause. Her heart had simply stopped for 11 minutes before paramedics revived her. 11 minutes without oxygen. The brain damage was severe. Whitney absorbed this information, then walked onto the stage of the Hollywood Bowl like nothing had happened. She performed "I Wanna Dance with Somebody" while her cousin lay brain dead 2,000 miles away. She danced and smiled while Amber sat in a hospital waiting room, still wearing her school uniform, still wondering why Aunt Whitney hadn't called back. During "How Will I Know," the irony of the lyrics cut through her like glass. How will I know if he really loves me? I say a prayer with every heartbeat. She was literally praying between verses, lips moving in silent desperation whenever she turned up stage. But the moment that broke her completely happened during "Where Do Broken Hearts Go?" The line that destroyed her was, "Where do broken hearts go? Can they find their way home?" Because Felicia would never find her way home. And Amber, little Amber, who Whitney had held as a baby, who called her Auntie Whit, who had a voice like an angel just like the Houston women, was now orphaned. Her father had left when she was 2. Felicia was all she had. Mid-song, Whitney saw Roberta answer the phone again. Their eyes met across the stage. Roberta's face told her everything. Felicia was gone. Time of death, 8:42 p.m. Pacific, 11:42 p.m. in Newark. Whitney stopped singing because she couldn't breathe. The microphone felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. The lights were too bright, too hot, burning through her like judgment. 17,500 people waiting for her voice, but all she could hear was Amber crying on that unanswered phone call. So she walked off. Here's what nobody understood until now. The aftermath was brutal. The media painted Whitney as a diva. Whitney's walkout screamed the headlines. Houston has a problem, mocked the tabloids. Radio DJs questioned her professionalism. Fans demanded explanations. The Hollywood Bowl threatened legal action. But Whitney was already on a red-eye to Newark. She arrived at 6 a.m., went straight from the airport to Amber's grandmother's house. The little girl was sitting on the porch steps, still in yesterday's clothes, still waiting for someone to explain why her mother wouldn't wake up. When Amber saw Whitney's limo pull up, she ran down the walkway, crying, "Auntie Whit, Auntie Whit, Mommy won't wake up." Whitney caught her, held her, and made a decision that the public wouldn't learn about for 20 years. The darkest truth about that night: Whitney legally adopted Amber Crawford. 3 weeks later, no publicity, no announcement. She raised her as Amber Houston told the world she was a cousin she was helping out. Amber lived with Whitney's mother, Sissy, to avoid media attention, but Whitney paid for everything: private school, college, therapy, voice lessons when Amber showed talent at age 12. But the guilt from that unanswered phone call never left Whitney. She installed a special phone system, multiple lines, that would find her anywhere in the world. She became obsessed with being reachable. Her staff was instructed that any call from family, especially children, was to be put through immediately, even if she was on stage. The security footage from the Hollywood Bowl, locked in their archives, shows something heartbreaking. After Whitney left, one camera kept rolling, forgotten by the chaos. It captured Roberta Stillman standing alone on the abandoned stage, holding that cellular phone, tears streaming down her face. For 3 minutes, she stood there, looking at the spot where Whitney had been, whispering, "I'm sorry," over and over. But there's a detail that changes the entire story. In 2012, after Whitney's death, Amber Crawford Houston, now 32, married, with children of her own, finally spoke publicly about that night. She revealed something Whitney never told anyone. Felicia had called Whitney earlier that day, at 2 p.m. She'd said she felt strange, like something was wrong with her heart. She asked Whitney to pray for her. Whitney did, right there on the phone, then promised to call after the show to check on her. The last thing Felicia said was, "I love you, Whit. If anything happens to me, take care of my baby." Whitney thought it was just anxiety. Felicia had always been dramatic, but she'd literally received her cousin's last request 6 hours before walking on stage. When she realized Felicia's final words were a premonition, the weight of that responsibility crushed her. The Hollywood Bowl performance of August 3, 1992, was never officially recorded, but bootleg audio exists, captured by a fan named Marcus Webb on a Sony Walkman. If you listen carefully to the third song, just before Whitney stops singing, you can hear her whisper something. Audio experts enhanced it in 2018. She's saying, "I'm sorry, Felicia. I'm so sorry." Wait, the most incredible part is what happened years later. In 2009, Amber Houston made her debut as a recording artist. Her stage name? Amber Crawford, honoring the mother she barely remembered. Her first single? A gospel song called "Unanswered Prayers," about the night she lost her mother but gained an angel. The angel was Whitney. The song contains a line that only makes sense if you know this story. "You didn't answer when I called, but you answered with your life." Whitney was in the studio when Amber recorded it. According to the sound engineer, Tony Martinez, Whitney had to leave the room during the bridge. She stood in the hallway, visible through the glass, shoulders shaking with sobs. It was the first time she'd forgiven herself for that unanswered call. But the Hollywood Bowl story doesn't end there. On August 3, 2002, exactly 10 years after the walk-off, Whitney returned to the Hollywood Bowl, unannounced, unpublicized. She bought all 17,500 tickets herself, donating them to children's charities, filling the venue with kids who'd never been to a concert. She performed a full show, 2 hours, no breaks. But she changed the setlist. The third song wasn't "Where Do Broken Hearts Go?" It was a gospel hymn called "His Eye is on the Sparrow." She introduced it by saying, "This is for Felicia Crawford and every phone call we wish we'd answered." Halfway through the song, a spotlight illuminated someone in the VIP box. It was Amber, now 17, the same age Felicia was when she taught Whitney to sing. Amber stood and joined Whitney for the last chorus, their voices blending in harmony that sounded like redemption. The truth nobody talks about. Every August 3rd after 1992, no matter where Whitney was touring, she would stop at 8:42 p.m. and call Amber, just to hear her voice, just to answer. The calls continued until February 11, 2012, the night Whitney died. Amber's phone rang at 8:42 p.m. No one was on the other end, just silence. Then faintly, like wind through trees, the sound of someone singing, "Where Do Broken Hearts Go?" The Hollywood Bowl has a memorial plaque for performers who've given legendary shows. There's no plaque for Whitney Houston's 1992 performance, but maintenance workers report something strange. Every August 3rd, 3 specific seats in the front row, seats that should be empty, show signs of disturbance, compressed cushions, like someone sat there recently. The seats? The exact spots where Felicia, Amber, and Whitney's mother, Sissy, sat during Whitney's 1989 Hollywood Bowl triumph, her first performance at the venue. Security cameras show nothing. The seats are empty, but the impressions remain. Here's what will haunt you forever. In Whitney's personal effects, found after her death, was a ticket. Hollywood Bowl, August 3rd, 1992, front row center. The show she never finished, written on the back in her handwriting. "The night I learned that fame means nothing if you can't answer when family calls." Below that, in different ink, added years later, "But love means everything when you answer with your life." Amber Houston Crawford is now a successful gospel singer and vocal coach. She teaches young artists in Newark, in the same church where Felicia taught Whitney. Every lesson begins the same way. Before you learn to sing, learn to listen. You never know when someone's calling for the last time. The abandoned recording of Whitney's 3 songs from August 3rd, 1992, exists in the Hollywood Bowl archives. It's never been released, but estate lawyers confirm Whitney's will contains specific instructions. The recording can only be played publicly once, at Amber's funeral, whenever that may be. Whitney wanted the last sound Amber heard to be the night that changed both their lives. The final, most devastating truth. 3 hours before Whitney died at the Beverly Hilton, she tried to call Amber. The call didn't go through. Amber was on a plane. When Amber landed and saw the missed call, she immediately dialed back. Too late. Whitney was already gone. But Amber swears, and she'll testify to this until her dying day, that her phone rang again at 8:42 p.m. that night. When she answered, she heard Whitney's voice, clear as day, singing 3 words from "Where Do Broken Hearts Go?" "Find their way." Then silence. Then peace. The Hollywood Bowl still stands. Show 3,847 in its history, remains the only performance ever abandoned mid-song. They never issued refunds. Whitney paid them personally, $3.2 million from her own account, with handwritten apology notes to all 17,500 ticket holders. One recipient, Maria Gonzalez from Riverside, still has her note. It reads, "I'm sorry I couldn't sing for you that night. Someone I loved was dying, and someone else needed me to live. Music can wait, love cannot. Whitney." That's the night Whitney Houston walked off stage. Not because she was a diva, not because she was difficult, but because a 7-year-old girl needed her more than 17,000 fans did. And for once in her superstar life, Whitney chose love over applause. She chose right. Some ghosts sing forever, some stages never forget, and sometimes, just sometimes, An unanswered call becomes the most important answer of all.